September 22nd, 2020 Rule Development Workshop for School Board Policy 8420.02, Emergency Policy Requiring Face Coverings, is now in session. The policy was adopted by the school board on August 11th, 2020 as an emergency board policy due to the current COVID-19 pandemic. The emergency policy is being revised so the policy can remain in effect after its initial 90 days have expired and be in compliance with applicable Florida law. Pam, roll call, please. Oh, Cheryl, could you share your?
Yes, absolutely.
Or here.
Mrs. Belford?
Present.
Ms. McDougall?
Present.
Mr. Susin?
Present.
Mrs. Descovich? And Mrs. Campbell?
Present.
Thank you, Pam. We will now say the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. The board had a work session on September 10th, 2020. Today is the public's first opportunity to make public comments on the revisions. A second opportunity for the public to address the revisions will be held on October 6th, 2020, prior to board action. Before any comments, I request that Robin Novelli, Chief Operating Officer, provide us the executive summary.
Good afternoon, Board, Madam Chair, Dr. Mullins. The summary for the proposed policy revision. The policy was adopted by the school board on August 11th as an emergency board policy due to the current coronavirus pandemic, and that the superintendent found that there is an imminent danger and a need to protect public health, safety, and/or welfare posed by COVID-19. The emergency policy as adopted governs the conduct of staff, students, visitors, and vendors in district facilities. The emergency policy became effective on August 11th and will remain in effect for 90 days unless extended pursuant to Section 120 of Florida statutes. This policy is being revised so that the policy can remain in effect after its initial 90 days have expired and to be in compliance with applicable Florida law. When we got together at the last session, we took a look at the red line version, and the board had a few comments and concerns and wanted to change a few things. The easiest place to see that is on the red line draft, and I can pull that up on the screen here. In paragraph C, the board asked that the word immediately be inputted between the words policy and by, and we also went ahead and spelled out what DOH represented, the Department of Health. So that sentence now says, as such, during times of elevated communicable disease, community spread, the superintendent working with the Department of Health, DOH, may activate this policy immediately by notifying the school community of the implementation of the policy. And as we go down, another revision that the board asked for in our work session, you can find in F1C, where the word shirts was substituted, and we used the word accessories, which was more in line with what came right out of the dress code. We also included where that came from, Board Policy and Administrative Procedures 5511, dress and grooming. And then the other thing the board asked for was to substitute the word requires, where we had the word supports in paragraph G. And so that sentence now reads, faculty and students are allowed to use a face shield in lieu of a mask when the instruction requires the ability to see the face of the student and/or the teacher. And that was the extent of the changes the board requested.
Thank you, Mr. Novelli. Any board members have questions or comments for Mr. Novelli? Okay. Is there anyone present here today who would like to address the revisions to School Board Policy 8420.02, emergency policy requiring face coverings? Mr. Savage. Can you do me a favor and approach the mic when Mr. Novelli steps away? Thanks, Mr. Savage.
You're welcome. I had a question about G. Does that allow face shields to be worn instead of masks throughout schools and facilities? Because I don't think there's clarification about that currently. Because we seem to be having a lot of teachers call us about that, as well as we're seeing the community on Facebook with some misconceptions as well. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Gibbs, do you want to address interpretation of the policy language?
Yes, in section G, the first sentence says face shields may be used by persons to comply with the policy, and then it encourages faculty and students to use the face shield when seeing of the mouth is a requirement for whatever they're doing in the class. So I would say that yes, it is allowed based on the first sentence, and then we're actively encouraging their use in that particular instance when they need to see the mouth is necessary for whatever is going on during the lesson.
Is there anyone else present that would like to speak on the policy? Board, any comment or question?
I do.
Ms. McDougall.
So I just want to make sure I understand correctly, Mr. Gibbs. So in this language here, that somebody could use a face shield instead of a mask, no matter what?
That's what it says.
I do not believe that was the intent of what we were trying to do, because we know that face shields are sort of okay, but they do not protect as a mask does. So I'm concerned about that piece of language in there.
So as you may recall, Ms. McDougall, that was the conversation that I brought up at our work session on this policy because I shared those concerns and was also getting the feedback from teachers.
Right.
But in our discussion my recommendation was that we remove the first sentence and go only with the second sentence, but we did not have board majority to go that direction. So unless there is an additional board member that would like to discuss the modification to that first sentence.
No.
No.
One face shield and so what's happening, because I've had emails, that teachers are very much afraid because people are wearing face shields and not masks throughout the whole day. And it doesn't give them the same level of protection. So we have just opened up a very big can of worms.
I always thought we were supposed to wear a mask with a shield. That's what I thought. We're not doing that?
So the medical recommendation is if you are going to wear a shield, that you also wear a mask along with it. The shield is basically to protect the eyes from anything coming into them, more so than protecting anything from going out to others. The way that the policy is worded, we are basically saying you can wear a face shield instead of a mask. Well, that's what I tried to bring up at our last meeting was this
loophole, really.
this loophole. So, but it didn't go anywhere.
I'm in favor of making a mask also with a face shield at the same time, because I'm sorry, the bottom line is that it does open you up for things, unless there's some kind of a medical situation that allows them to not do so. Just like consistent with all the others.
Right.
So am I hearing then that the request would be to eliminate the first sentence as previously requested, or perhaps face shields may be used by persons to comply with this policy as an accommodation when masks cannot be worn?
I mean, I think if I'm a speech language teacher, the student needs to be able to see my lips, and I need to be able to see theirs. So that makes perfect sense to me. But to have a whole school wearing face shields makes no sense, because you're just making everybody vulnerable to the virus. And until we know that this virus isn't airborne, I think this is a risk for people. And I have people calling me all the time saying, why is this happening? I thought we were supposed to wear a mask. So I just want us to be very clear about this.
So, Mr. Gibbs, at this point in the process,
I'm so sorry.
Yep, I can fix it and we can re-advertise. And
so do you understand the intent of the majority of the board as to the expectation, and will wordsmith it appropriately?
you want the face shield being allowed to comply with the policy to be removed, and only allowing face shields when it's necessary to see the mouth for any particular lesson.
I would personally suggest when it's necessary. Yeah, I mean, we can leave it at that because we have the exceptions later, right? So
The exceptions section is above this. It's earlier in the document.
Right.
So those accommodations for exceptions are already addressed. We don't
Right.
need to address that in this
Right.
paragraph.
I can add face shields may be worn with based on an exemption from the policy if you would rather have that statement in there as well while we're amending it.
Madam Chair,
Yes, ma'am.
just not to reiterate all the same things I think I said last time, except that apparently we weren't all on the same page with where we were going with this. But currently, some of our students are using a face shield who are having a harder time from the get-go with a face mask. And we provided, as a district, every elementary school student with a face shield. I know from my own personal experience in our family, there are some, my son has some teachers that he goes in there, he just knows, in this teacher's class I can wear a face shield, in this teacher's class I can't, I have to wear my mask. We have some that are wearing them outside, and I know we talked about, oh, well, it's outside recess, but just so you know, that's not necessarily happening. We do have schools where students are being told if you're going to play anything besides just, wandering around the field 6 feet apart from anyone else, you have to have something on. So I just, this has been difficult, it's challenging. I understand the principle behind what, the difference between the protection of a face shield and a mask. But the truth is, this is good, better, best. Some of our students, in order to get this done, a shield is what they can do. So that's why I advocated for us to leave this the way that it was the last time, except for changing supports to requires. I'll just, it may not make a difference, but I did want to say that.
I think my concern is that teachers, I'm not so concerned about our students, I'm concerned about teachers are using this as a way to not wear a mask. And they don't have any exceptions. They don't necessarily need, students don't need to see their lips. So I feel like if we get rid of the first sentence, face shields may be used by persons to comply with this policy, I think that will solve most of it. I don't know how do you feel, Ms. Belford?
Ms. Descovich, you look like you want to speak.
Yeah, a couple things. One, I personally know quite a few children that are using face shields instead for reasons of anxiety and other issues. So this isn't a light change. This is a big change that we need to make very clear to the public. I'm glad that we have to start the process over to do that. We need to let our students and staff know that because it's going to affect decisions families are going to make for their students. And Ms. McDougall, did you just say we have teachers that don't need to show their face? Is that what?
I'm thinking of teachers who don't necessarily need to not show their face.
Well, I'm saying show their mouth, like
For
because
their
in my
lips, there may
opinion,
be,
in order to teach, a lot of times phonics and other things, you have to see their mouth.
and
So
that's
anybody should
when
have
they can use it for instruction. Yes, absolutely, that's what the next line says. My concern is that people are circumventing what the intent of wearing a mask. That's my concern.
Understood. So I'll just say one last time again, as I keep repeatedly saying, a face shield, no. I mean, we know this is airborne, Ms. McDougall. Like everything we've read as us, as the board, I mean, we've been consuming this stuff for months. We know it's airborne. It's funny the news has come out just this week and they're like, oh, it might be airborne. We've known from day one that this is airborne, just because we're reading the documents. A face shield isn't that effective, but neither is half the masks these students are wearing. And until we're ready to really like lay down the law and say it has to be this kind of mask to fight over a face shield, and then we've got thin spandex, which does nothing. It's super frustrating. It doesn't make any sense. It's just what's making people feel better in their brains than it's actually protecting. And so I think it's nonsense.
Mr. Susan, would
No,
you
I'm
like
not,
to?
I'm not going to say anything because I'm going to get real fired up.
Okay.
So I've said it.
So are you in agreement with Ms. McDougall's recommendation to remove the first sentence?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, and the reason is that we have individuals that are taking advantage of the situation, and that's not fair. And if we're going to be talking about being serious about making people follow the rules and not get sick, and our workforce needs to be there educating kids, and if that's the #1 rule, then we follow the rules. And we've already had instances to this point of individuals trying to circumnavigate the rules. And then on top of that, we have individuals that currently, I get emails every day of people that are trying to do it. So we have to go the other direction. Just like we were before. We said we were going to try to do this. We tried to do it on a light way to do it. And then all of a sudden we had to come to another place because people were not taking it serious and then serious. I mean, we see the breaks out in Europe. We see everything that's happening. It comes back, and the last thing you want to do is let your guard down. So I understand 100% what Ms. Descovich and what Ms. Campbell are saying. I just come from the economics and workforce piece that if we don't start doing this, something might happen, and then we are in a different place, and then I can't have my kids playing football. I can't have the kids doing band. We can't have schools open. We have kids that are going into the community, and I just get irate. So yeah, I want masks.
So much for not
Sorry.
saying anything, Mr. Susan.
So I understand what you're saying, Mr. Susan, but I did want to clarify one thing
I'm
as
really hungry.
far as people going around the rules is that this policy, if you look at the red line version, the language around face shields is what we've had out there. So if teachers have been using face shields, they have not been they may have been going around what the intent of a few members of the board wanted, but not against what actually was written in our emergency policy. So nobody's violated anything if they've used a face shield instead of a mask at certain times of the day. I just wanted to clarify that. So now what we're saying, this is a change, like Ms. Descovich said. Now if we change this, we are going to have to make sure we get the word out to schools that you may not use a face shield in lieu of a mask unless it's specifically required by the instruction that you're giving at the time.
Or as an accommodation for someone who has an exception.
Right. So this is the change. So now if they, going forward, if they're doing it, then they would be going around the rule. But I don't think anybody's, nobody has been in violation of it if they've been doing it up to this point.
No, I apologize if that was the intent of what was said. It absolutely in no way was I saying that somebody that was following the rules were breaking the rules. On contrary, we have had many instances inside of our district where individuals may not have been doing what they were supposed to be following the rules. And unfortunately, as Ms. McDougall was saying, there are instances that they're trying to weasel a way through here. So I'm sorry, I support it. That's it.
Dr. Mullins, do we have any information on where we've had positive cases and had a quarantine? Is it in classes where they've been kind of using face shields throughout the class as opposed to classes that are using face masks throughout?
I'd have to defer to Dr. Thady. Dr. Thady, are you prepared to provide any perspective on that?
I can't imagine we would
So we're
know.
stepping this up just in case. And Mr. Susan mentioned
Yeah.
because he doesn't want his band students to stay home yet. I just left a meeting where you guys said the band students are cutting slits in their masks so that they can play their instruments. But a face shield is not effective, but they're going to walk around with masks with holes in them. Like this is getting
Just
like,
clarify it. It's not exactly like you're talking about. They're not walking around with a big old hole right here. It overlaps. But yes, just defending our band people, but yes.
Thank you for the clarification on that. Okay, Mr. Gibbs,
All
are
right.
you clear on the intent of the board?
I am.
Dr. Mullins, you look like you wanted to speak.
Well, I just need, might be clarification from Mr. Gibbs. New direction from the board with respect to face coverings will impact our reopening plan, which the board approved. So the language that we are currently implementing as a district based on the reopening plan would need to be modified, or I'm assuming it need to be changed to be consistent with the
Yeah, at the
with
final,
the policy.
when the board votes to make this effective, we would vote on the amendment to the reopening plan.
So we would bring both at the same.
Yeah, you can bring both.
Okay.
at the same time.
I just wanted to make sure understood the process. So one more thing. Enforcement of the new direction would not happen until there's board
So
approval.
after rulemaking is done, the rule is not in place. So right now, the current emergency plan is still in place, and the language there is the emergency language, so without the red lines.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, anyone
Just-
else?
Really quickly. According to our reopening plan, I just want to be very clear. According to our reopening plan, what we have said about our use of masks all along, and it's in not only a reopening plan, but in this policy itself. I'm looking for it. Each student, employee, visitor, vendor, or other person is required to wear a face covering at all times when social distancing cannot be adhered to while on school district policy. So I just want to make it clear and make sure the board is in agreement with me on this, that because that's the way we worded it, social distancing being defined as 6 feet. I don't know if we have this in here, but it's in our reopening plan. 6 feet apart, right? That means that a teacher could be standing in the front of their classroom, and if they're at least 6 feet from their students, they could stand maskless and teach. A bus driver, and I don't know what they've been told, and I know, but a bus driver who's sitting on a bus that's not full and their closest student is, let's say, 3 or 4 seats back, could drive their bus without a mask. Just putting that out there, just making sure. We're not, I just want to put that out there. So for some, and here's why I bring it up. Because for some who are in that position, like, okay, I know I can be up here and I'm away from everyone, but I'll go ahead and put my face shield on because that will make people feel more comfortable. It'll give you a little extra layer of protection. There's just making sure that that's still in there, correct? according to our policy. Mr. Gibbs?
Yes, it's still in there, 6 feet, you're allowed to take it off.
Okay. And we have put in our policy that students can't make their own determination. Oh, I'm 6 feet apart, I can take it, but employees can.
Right, the students would need the teacher or administrator.
Right.
Someone that's in charge of them
Right.
to make that decision.
Okay, thank you.
Anything else? Anyone else wish to speak on the policy? Do I have to ask that twice, Paul, like we do in the budget hearing, or just once?
I'm sorry?
If anyone wants to speak on the policy, do I have to ask it twice, like in the budget hearing, or just once?
You can ask again and see if there's anyone else. I think we kind of got off the public after we had our speaker. So.
Yes. Anyone else wish to speak to the policy? All right, hearing no further business, this meeting is adjourned.